everyone. My name is Nancy Lockwood. I am the FASD consultant at Health Nexus. Thanks for joining today to learn more about applications for our annual FASD Family and Caregiver Support Group micro grants. I want to recognize first that I'm joining you from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I live right by the mighty Ottawa River, and I recognize that the Algonquin people are the customary keepers and defenders of this watershed. I honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory we now know as the National Capital Region. Most of you watching today live and work on other traditional Indigenous unceded territories. I invite you to join me in taking a moment to reflect on and acknowledge this. So first, just a little background about Health Nexus. Health Nexus has been in operation for more than 30 years, working with diverse partners to help create healthy, equitable, and vibrant communities where people of all ages can thrive. Many of you may already know that in 2018, the Ontario government launched a number of FASD initiatives. And Health Nexus has been chosen to run a number of these initiatives, including managing these micro grants every year. The goal of all of these provincial initiatives are to support people with FASD and their family members and supporters. So thank you for joining to learn more about ways we can work together to increase supports for the FASD community. The purpose of this funding is to bring together people with FASD and their family members and supporters. By supporters, I'm including professionals, researchers, service providers, family members, community members, to improve outcomes and build connections. The amounts of the grants are up to $4,500 per group. And the groups can be existing groups, people who have received funding in the past, and we also welcome new applications. We want the groups to provide a forum for families, including caregivers, to facilitate a number of different community activities. So these activities may include support for each other. Peer support has been proven to be very valuable for people with FASD and their family members. We want the groups to be a place to share information. My experience working in this field is that some of the best ideas come from the people with lived and living experience, sharing strategies and ideas that have worked for them, discovering resources and sharing. We want the groups to build knowledge across the province. So some of the groups may be provincial, they may be virtual provincial groups, they may be specific to a region, but wherever, we want to be building information. We want to share effective best practices. So we're going to be looking for groups that are built on things that have been proven to be really helpful for the FASD community. And we really want to build connections. We know that the FASD population can be very isolated, and caregivers also talk to us about isolation. We're hoping to build community, build friendships, and ideally ones that extend beyond the life of each grant. As far as facilitation of the groups, they can be facilitated by service providers or volunteers, or ideally both. So an example of that would be if you had a group that was run by one of our provincial FASD workers, who then used some funding to hire a person with lived or living experience to co-facilitate the group. The groups can be in person, they can be virtual, or it can be both. So we've had groups who meet, say, 3 times a month virtually and then meet in person once a month. We have other groups who meet virtually during the year and then might have 1 or 2 in-person events. Some groups do all of their engagement in person. But what we want is for these groups to be a gathering spot and also to involve mentorship. What we have found is often people further along on their FASD journey have a wealth of information to share with those who are in the more early stages of their journey. They can share information, they can offer that peer support, which is so valuable. Whom can apply? So people who do not belong to an organization can apply. So that would include parents and caregivers and people with FASD, or people working for charitable or nonprofit organizations can apply. In other words, if you work for a for-profit organization, you can't apply for one of these grants. These are the targeted populations for the grants. So children, youth, or adults with FASD or possible FASD. We know there are a lot of people with FASD who have not been able to access diagnostic supports. Some will never be able to get a diagnosis if they can't get confirmation of prenatal alcohol exposure. So that's why we are making sure we include people with possible FASD. And you'll note I did not say suspected FASD. We do not use that term anymore. People with FASD have told us they find that offensive, and that's the last thing we want to be. Family members of people with FASD can be the target group of a grant. And also note when I say families, I'm talking about biological families and families formed through adoption, kinship, and customary care. So for example, we've had groups for parents of biological children with FASD. There have been groups for grandparents raising children with FASD. So again, we want to reach as many people needing support as possible. We want to make sure that our groups are embracing equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we're looking for groups that are reaching the following populations: people who are Francophone. So your group could be French only, it could be bilingual. It doesn't have to be, but we are a bilingual organization, we're a bilingual country, and that would be ideal. We're looking for applications that support First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Groups that are inclusive of our 2S LGBTQIA plus community, people with visible and invisible disabilities. FASD is a largely invisible disability. Other historically underserved communities, for example, of 2 years, we've had groups supporting parents of Black children with FASD in recognition that they were dealing with some extra issues such as intersectionality. Groups that support newcomers and members of remote and rural communities. We know people living in rural communities can be even more isolated. So we're not saying that your application has to be inclusive of all of these groups, but it might improve your chances of being selected. Some of the group applications in the past have been very innovative. Again, we're not saying you have to be extremely innovative, but there have been some wonderful ideas and you could replicate them. We've had groups that focused on cooking. One that I found really interesting was a group where parents and children came together. The children cooked a meal with a facilitator while the parents met together with another facilitator, and then everybody sat down and enjoyed the meal together. I saw another lovely idea for a cooking group for adults with FASD. They would join on Zoom, and with funding through the grant, they were sent those meal prep kits, you know, the ones like Good Food or Hello Fresh, and they would prepare the meal together and then eat it together on Zoom. We've seen some wonderful groups with an Indigenous focus that included drumming circles, other traditional practices, caregiver retreats. We've had recreation-focused groups, which included activities like bowling, perhaps just for people with FASD or for whole families. Some groups have been focused out in nature. There was one group for families where they would gather in nature, and we heard how much they just loved being together, doing something fun, something that tends to be really regulating, and again, meeting other people. A number of years before I worked for Health Nexus, I got funding for a group for youth who had FASD and enjoyed video gaming. I hired a young social worker who loved video gaming to run the group, and I hired a young adult with FASD to co-facilitate. And it was so interesting how, while they were gaming together, they got into conversations about FASD, how it affects them differently. They learned social skills along the way. We had a group focused on spirit horses. We've had a number of groups focused on animal assisted therapy and mindfulness. If you want to see a short webinar with some ideas from past years, you can go to this link. You can find it on the FASD Ontario website, and that will give you some ideas of out-of-the-box ways to support this community. And also just remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do something new. So you might hear of something that was done in another region and you could replicate it in your own region. You could even take some of your funding to hire the group leader that ran the group in the other region to mentor you to run your group. So that would, if you look at what other groups have done, you get to learn about what was successful, learn about things they may have found challenging, and how they could tweak it to be more successful. We often get questions about how we choose successful applications. We have a committee of people who look over every application very carefully. It's a lengthy process. We make sure people with lived experience are on that committee. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking for. We have a scoring rubric. So we make sure that the application form has been completely filled out, that you've been really clear about what you're going to do, that you've clearly explained your budget. So for example, if you just say, we're going to hire guest speakers, that's not really enough. We need to know, who are you thinking of hiring? What are the topics? Because we want to make sure that you have evidence to support what you're doing. We're looking for groups that have the potential for evaluation. This doesn't have to be a formal evaluation, but we want to know how you are going to identify whether you were successful, how you're going to identify what was challenging. There are eligibility criteria that have been given to us by the provincial government. So we want to make sure that you're following those criteria. And when you look at all of the instructions for the applications, those eligibility criteria are clearly spelled out. We need to know that you have a clear purpose and a clear goal that's in alignment with the goals of this funding. So we want not just that you're providing a gathering space, but what are you going to do when you get together? How is that going to improve outcomes for people with FASD? We're hoping that your activities support one or more of those identified target audiences I just spoke of. We want you to be reaching diverse groups. And we need to know that the funds are spent on eligible activities. There are certain guidelines. I'll give an example. You cannot spend funds on something that will be a profit to you. So say you've published a book on FASD. You could not use funds to buy your book to give out to the group. There's some other considerations. We want to make sure that your plan is person-centered, that it's strength-based, that it's FASD informed, that the person applying really understands FASD, and that is trauma informed. I'm not saying you need to hire a mental health professional, but you need a plan for if you have members who are exhibiting trauma or becoming triggered during a group meeting. You need a plan for that. And we're here to support you. We are going to look at geographical area. We need to fund groups across the province of Ontario. So if we get, say, 10 applications from Eastern Ontario, they may not all receive funding. Last year, we received a lot of applications from Southwestern Ontario. So some will end up not being approved just because we need to support the entire province. We'll look at the population served and the language of delivery. So if there are 4 applications from one area, but only one is bilingual, well, that might raise their score. Doesn't mean they're automatically improved, but they will get a higher score for that. We want to know that your activities are addressing a community need. And we do look at originality, innovation, and positive impact. So we're not saying you have to be innovative, but we do score on that. So keep it in mind. These are some examples of activities that can be funded. They can focus on family wellness, caregiver restorative time. Your groups can be virtual or in person. And when you're figuring out your budget, if, for example, it's virtual, you could ask for funding for a Zoom license. If it's in person, a percentage of funding could go to renting a room to gather. You might look at developing or making culturally relevant materials for people with FASD or their family members. So for instance, you may find something that was available in English and you're running a French group. Perhaps you could take some English resources and use a small amount of your funding to translate materials to French. You can use funding to promote your group, to get participants. You can use it for operational supports like childcare, getting a Zoom license if you need some sort of equipment. For example, say you were supporting youth and you wanted to do something like that video gaming group. We used a small amount of funds to buy everybody the same video game so they could play together. We made sure it was a game that could work on various platforms so they didn't need to go and get a new gaming platform. It can be used for printing or purchasing materials for group activities. It could also be used to register your members to attend some trainings or conferences. Some conferences are cost prohibitive given the amount of the grants, but you could, for example, offer registration fees for some less expensive conferences that you see taking place in Ontario. You can use the funds to hire a consultant to work with your group, or you can provide them with an honorarium. If you are hiring guest speakers with FASD or their family members, please make sure to offer them an honorarium in recognition of the generosity and bravery of them sharing their experience with you. We can help guide you on recommended amounts. If you're running a group by a volunteer, you can spend up to 25% of your funding to provide an honorarium for group facilitation. These are things that cannot be funded. So in the application form, there are certain activities laid out that the costs cannot be assigned to. They cannot cover anything that's funded by another source of funding. So I'll give an example. Say you're working for an agency and you have a number of Zoom licenses that you could be using. You can't purchase another Zoom license for your agency. You cannot use the funds for public awareness campaigns or advocacy activities. So if it's something like an event for FASD Awareness Day, that is one thing. But if it was, say, FASD prevention activities, I understand that's a little complicated. So if you have questions related to this, please come to one of our drop-in sessions where we can answer the questions for you. You cannot use funds to make donations or for fundraising campaigns. You can't use it to repay debts. It can't be used for anything political or religious, or for anything that's taking place outside Ontario. And as I mentioned before, to pay the group leader for any of their own products. Here are some things past leaders have suggested. They recommend connecting with other group leaders, share your knowledge, share your ideas, and If you are selected, we host a number of trainings and meetings throughout the year so that you can get to know each other. Some recommend avoiding in-person events in the winter months if there's harsh weather. A lot of suggestions to involve the whole family, virtual options for rural families. Keep it simple, be flexible. We know life happens. An example would be the year that COVID started. Groups had to immediately become virtual when they were in person. Try to involve a community organization. So if you receive funding from us, you can also have funding from other sources, or even at the end of the funding cycle, we can help you network and try to find other sources of funding so that you can sustain your group once the fiscal year ends. Try to plan and book your guest speakers well in advance, because there are certain times of year that there's a lot of competition. I find especially in the fall months, there are so many different conferences going on. It can be difficult to get a guest speaker. And just keep in mind sustainability of the group and how you'll be able to keep it going. So you can reach out to the Health Nexus team to get advice on the application process, to answer specific questions. If you want to bounce ideas off us, you can contact us. Say, this is my idea. Do you think it's a good idea? We can help you with budgeting. We can help you review and advise on the feasibility of what you're thinking. We might be able to connect you to guest speakers. And again, we can help with planning for sustainability. There is a facilitator's guide for these groups at this link, so I recommend that you have a look at that. If you are successful in your application, these are some ways that we can support you. So we offer telephone and email support with our FASD project coordinator. Throughout the year, we offer a series of webinars and virtual trainings. And at the trainings, we have time where you can share what's been successful for you. You can discuss challenges, and we can all brainstorm together with possible solutions. We provide a list of all the FASD groups on the FASD Ontario website so people can find you. We now have an interactive map on the website so they can find you if they're searching their region for different supports. As I said, we have these regular meetings so that we can build connections between the group leaders. We have a listserv with many hundreds of members where we can share your activities. So say you have an event coming up, you can send us a flyer or information and ask us to send it out to the network. And we have various documents and tools that we can provide to you. We can also provide accommodations as needed. So please reach out to us if you want to ask for accommodations. It's entirely confidential. So for example, if you find budgeting challenging, you could reach out to us to help to create your budget. You can ask us to manage the funds for you. We've done that for a number of groups in the past. Another example is if you find reporting challenging, you'll be asked to do a midterm and final report. They're done online. They are quite simple, but still, if you prefer to give an oral report, we can make that accommodation. So please do not be afraid to ask. You may find during the course of your funding that you need to amend your budget. Sometimes a speaker may end up to be more or less expensive than planned. You may have budgeted for food and you ended up needing a little bit more, or the room you wanted to rent might end up being a little bit more. If you need to change your budget by up to 10% in any of those category lines, you don't need to consult with us. If you need to make an adjustment beyond this limit, if it's going to be an adjustment of more than 10%, then you're going to have to file a budget amendment. But again, this has been done in the past, and we're happy to help you with this. Also, if for any reason you cannot spend all of your funds, we need to know that as soon as possible so we can reassign those funds. If we get to the end of the funding cycle and then you tell us that you have leftover funds, we have to return it to the ministry. But if we find out well in advance, we can assign it to another group or perhaps even start another short group. Please try to complete all your activities and spend all of your funds by March 1st. If you need to report any changes to your funding, or if you are not able to complete your activities, let us know as soon as possible. And if you're just having difficulty meeting your goals or reallocating your funds, we can again meet with you individually on Zoom and brainstorm how to work through this. Here's the timeline for the 2025 and 2026 fiscal year. So you must submit your application by June 27th. You will receive your funding decision by July 11th. Successful applicants will be sent a contract, and that needs to be signed by July 25th. Then midterm reports are due November 14th. You have to complete your activities by March 15th, although ideally we say March 1st so that we can help you if you are stumbling. If you are completing your bookkeeping, that needs to be done by March 15th. But again, we recommend try to do it by March 1st in case there are any hiccups along the way. Receipts submitted for those groups for whom Health Nexus has held the fund, that must be completed by March 15th, and the final reports are due by April 7th, 2026. So if you have questions, please reach out to us at fasdsupport@healthnexus.ca. No question is a silly question. We are here to help you. And with that, I want to thank you so much and have a good day. Thanks for joining us. Bye.